Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 14. Chapter 14 is all about what makes a species. We just finished talking about prezygotic barriers. Prezygotic barriers means these things prevent the egg from being fertilized. And we see those prezygotic barriers up here at the top. Next, we move on to postzygotic barriers. These are things that did not prevent the egg from being fertilized. It did get fertilized. However, the fertilized egg, in some cases, will not yield a healthy baby. In other cases, it does yield a healthy baby, but that healthy baby is sterile and is unable to have babies of their own. And last is hybrid breakdown. The first generation is healthy. The first generation can make babies, but subsequent generations can't. They get weak, they get unhealthy, they die. Hybrid inviability, as we said just a little bit ago. The zygote or fetus does not come to term. There are some frogs where this happens. The graphic we saw just a second ago was showing some salamanders. I know of two species of frogs that are very closely related to each other, but when they mate, you get 100% embryo mortality. None of them hatch. They're both called the great tree frog because they're actually, one is diploid, the other is tetraploid. One has 2 copies of your chromosome, the other one has 4 copies of your chromosome. We talked about meiosis quite a while ago. When the 4-copy frog makes its sperm, that means it puts 2 copies into each sperm cell. When the 2-copy female makes her egg, she puts 1 copy of each chromosome in the egg. If the sperm and egg unite, that's 3 copies of each chromosome. And for some reason, odd numbers just don't work with chromosomes. It has to be even numbers. 2 is okay, 4 is okay, 8 is okay, 3 is not. 100% mortality. The eggs never hatch. Hybrid inviability. The zygote or fetus does not come to term. Next is hybrid sterility. The hybrid baby is actually healthy, lives quite well, but it itself is not fertile. And the classic example of this is what we saw in the previous picture, and that was a mule. We even use the term mule for a whole lot of things. Oh, it's a mule, meaning it's not fertile, meaning it can't have babies. A mule is a cross between a horse and a donkey. A male donkey bred with a female horse will give you a mule. When you do that, you get a large, strong, very healthy individual that itself is sterile and can't have babies of its own. Our last is hybrid breakdown. This is where the first generation is healthy and viable and fertile, but subsequent generations are feeble or infertile. The example that we showed just a minute ago was with wheat. So post-zygotic barriers. It made a fertilized egg. Some of those eggs don't go to term. Some make healthy young that are sterile. Others make healthy young that are fertile, but their babies are feeble or infertile. Hybrid breakdown. Remember, all of these will prevent gene flow. All of these will prevent genes from being passed from one population to another. If we're preventing genes from being passed from one generation, from one population to another, what we're doing is we're allowing the mutations, we're allowing the adaptations that accumulate over many generations to stay in a population, and eventually, if you allow enough of these to build up, then you have formerly one species that has now been separated into 2 separate species. How do you get speciation? By preventing gene flow. How do you prevent gene flow? These 9 things we just talked about. Preventing genes from being shared between populations. Hybrid breakdown. The first is healthy, subsequent are not healthy, weak or feeble. So, we're preventing gene flow. We're going to make different species. We're going to witness species develop. If a geographic barrier separates two populations and they turn into different species, this is called allopatric speciation. Allopatric speciation occurs because of geographic isolation. A geographic isolation, allos. Allos means different. Patric, patros means father. So different father, it literally means different fatherland, different area. If a mountain range or some other natural feature prevents two populations from interbreeding, that's geographic isolation, and that causes what we call allopatric speciation. As we said, a mountain range can separate them. A large lake can subside. We talked about this a couple videos ago. A big lake subsides, and when it does, the water level goes down, and now this one large lake where all these fish were able to swim around and interbreed, all of the fish now isolated in little ponds because the level of the lake sunk, and now there's just a few isolated ponds that still have fish in them, and the fish aren't able to move between the ponds anymore. All right, that would be allopatric speciation. A continent can split. We'll talk about continental drift in a few videos. We'll talk about continental drift. And if a continent literally splits, then now you have an ocean between species. Now you have something that's preventing them from crossing. It's preventing gene flow. And last is when an individual can colonize, or rather a group of individuals can colonize a new area, and this is referred to as the founder effect. We talked about the founder effect in a few videos ago. The founder effect is when a small group colonizes a new area, and in colonizing that new area, it means that they're no longer able to have contact with the larger population they used to be part of. If that separation continues long enough, they can become a new species. But again, it takes thousands of generations for that separation to make the difference. This is that allopatric speciation. Two species of ground squirrel, one on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, one on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Remember, the Grand Canyon is a mile in some places between the north and southern rims. A mile, no big deal for a bird to fly across, so this would not be a barrier for a bird. But what about for a little squirrel? Is a squirrel going to scamper all the way down to the bottom of the river and then all the way back up again? No. This is a definite, obvious barrier. Genetic testing has proven that these two are separate species, different species that were separated by this natural feature. This is geographic isolation. Geographic isolation causes allopatric speciation. Next is sympatric speciation. If allos means different fatherland, sympatric, sim means the same fatherland. This is when new species can develop within the home range of the parent species. There are a number of ways in which gene flow can be reduced within this population. One way is by food choice. If this group is only looking for food in deep water, and this other population is only looking for food in shallow water, they're no longer breeding together. They could swim back and forth between one another, but if this one is looking for stuff in deep water and that one's looking for stuff in shallow water, they're not in the same areas anymore. If that happens, if that stays long enough, that these two populations are separated for long enough, they can become different species. How long is long enough? Well, we said a little while ago, thousands of generations is long enough. Another way that can happen is through polyploidy, and we talked about polyploidy a long time ago, several chapters ago. Polyploidy means that you have more than the normal number of chromosomes. We just talked a few minutes ago about those two different species of frogs. The one that's a diploid, that's the normal number. You can have what's called tetraploid. That means it's got twice the normal number of chromosomes. This can happen through a meiosis accident. Meiosis can not happen, and you can make sperm or egg that's got too many chromosomes in it. And most of the time it's a death sentence. Most of the time it doesn't work. But very rarely, it might happen in a male and a female, and then when it does happen, you can end up in polyploidy. When you get that, now we've got this new group that's not able to breed with the other group because, remember, 2 is okay, 4 is okay, 3 is not. So they can no longer breed with one another anymore. Another one could be habitat differentiation. We talked about habitat isolation. Habitat isolation is when this group is looking for looking for food along the or living along the forest floor, and these others live within the canopy. If you're looking for mates on the forest floor and they're looking for mates in the canopy, you're not going to be looking in the same places. So if they stay separated like that, if they live in these different areas for long enough, this is sympatric speciation. And last would be sexual selection. Females looking for certain traits. This group of females looks for this particular trait, and so those males that have that trait will do best, passing that trait on to their kids. This other group has the females look for a different sexual trait, a different thing that's exciting to them. And if these two groups of females, if they're looking for these different traits, then that means that the males will have those traits, or rather the males that do have those traits will do better. And then those males themselves will pass those traits on to their kids, and you allow that to go on long enough, and we get new species.